Good morning, English 121. So, yesterday we started going over rhetorical context and we introduced essay number one, which is going to be your um, summary analysis essay. And a big part of that is you're going to be taking an article, a piece, and you're going to be summarizing it, and then you're going to be analyzing it for different concepts that we're going to get into over the coming weeks. Now, rhetorical context is something that can be broken down into three parts. Now, our reading from yesterday suggested that those three parts were audience, purpose, and author. Um, I'm going to kind of go over those in a little bit more detail here in a second, but I want us to think about the word rhetoric. I asked y'all yesterday what you thought that word meant. And we talked a little bit about what is rhetoric. Now, how I want you to think of rhetoric is it's the study of language and how that people can use it to manipulate others. All right. So that's kind of rhetoric, and it's happening in our world all around us every day. Constantly being barraged, pictures, images, text, um, constantly being barraged by rhetoric, and it all has a very specific design on you, the consumer, the reader. Um, so I want to think of rhetoric in terms of, I kind of want to throw out author, and I want to put in the idea of genre. And the author certainly does play a role in the rhetorical context of a piece. But I want us to think of it in terms of the acronym GAP. So genre, purpose, audience, that would be GPA, GAP, however you want to look at it. But genre, purpose, and audience are the three that I would kind of like us to look at. Now, genre, the one that I'm adding in, that's simply the vehicle in which the message is being used, is being portrayed in. Is it an article? Is it a blog? Is it a commercial? Is it a movie? Right? Those are all genre. And each genre has its own way of constructing text to have an effect on the consumer. So genre might be easy to identify initially, but then determining how does that genre mold rhetorical context is a whole nother thing. Now, the other two really big components to rhetorical context, which I think is at the heart of any writing, whenever a writer sits down to write anything, is going to be purpose and audience. And if you can determine those two things with clarity when you sit down to write anything in any context, you're going to already be really far ahead of other people who are attempting the same thing. So, purpose. All right. Now, our rhetorical context reading didn't go over these six features, but I really think purpose comes down to when somebody asks, what is your purpose? It really comes down to six categories that I want you to think about. And they're called rhetorical aims: to express, to explore, to inform, to analyze, to persuade, and to reflect. Those are the six different rhetorical aims that purpose can kind of be boiled down to. And so when you are thinking about purpose, what is your goal? Are you trying to persuade someone? Are you trying to analyze something? Are you trying to express something? Right? Are you reflecting? Are you writing a personal journal and you're reflecting on things, right? Purpose drives your writing to a great degree. Now, you can have multiple of these rhetorical aims happening at once in a piece of writing. And I would argue you need to be effective. To have an effective piece of writing, the more of these that you can include, I think the more powerful or the more effective your piece of writing is going to be. So when I ask you about what do you think the author's purpose was, I want you to think about those six categories, or those 6 rhetorical aims. I want you to put it into context of that, and how that shapes that piece of writing. Now, audience is something that's really important to think about as well in when you sit down to write. And I would argue it's probably the most important aspect to really sit down and think about. And I think that's where a lot of writers they fail, or they're ineffective, is because oftentimes they sit down and they are thinking in terms of their own game, in terms of their own desire, instead of saying, who is my audience? And defining that audience. What is your audience's beliefs? What are their personal values? What are all the characteristics and attributes that make up your audience? Those are all really important to your writing, because then if you're able to appeal to those beliefs, those characteristics, those attitudes, you're going to be a lot more successful in your writing. Audience should, once you can identify your specific audience, you can really get into your purpose, which is what we had just talked about, and how you're going to use purpose to manipulate that audience in terms of rhetorical context. And I don't think a lot of writers think about audience at all, especially in high school. And so that kind of gets into what you're going to do today. You're going to be reading the Lumen article on the writing process. And that article really starts to get into the differences between college writing and high school writing. And one of the big differences that I see is that in high school, you're taught that there's right and wrong answers. Here's your prompt, prove that this is right? Like figure out the right answer to the problem and portray it in a 5-paragraph essay. College, you want to get away from that. You want to get away from that kind of thinking, right? From there being just a right answer. You want to get to the point where you are almost raising more questions about your topic than you're answering, right? You want to broaden your topic through more questions, right? Through analysis. You want to create a more engaging conversation. And so that's a big shift for a lot of high school students, and that's why they struggle in college composition, is because critical reading and critical writing is not searching for just one right answer above all else. It doesn't value that. And that's not what college reading and writing is about. That's kind of, as you read the Lumen piece about the writing process, that's what you are going to be looking at, is some of the differences between the two. So after you've read that Lumen piece on the writing process, you're going to want to take quiz number 2, which is up on our content for week 2. And that'll be all about rhetorical context and the writing process. Again, some of the main points that you should be getting this week. With rhetorical context, be thinking, they call it the rhetorical triangle. You can see it as Lumen had put it, with purpose, audience, and author. There's other methodology that teaches it as GPA or GAP, which is genre, audience, and purpose. But that's the rhetorical triangle. So making sure you understand those 3 things. Now, I want you to understand purpose in terms of 6 rhetorical aims: to express, to explore, to analyze, to inform, to reflect, and to persuade. So, and then, the differences between high school and college writing. As always, if you have any questions, concerns, shoot me an email, and we'll see you tomorrow.